They went into an area that had flock cameras, and they got them like that. So this was his argument for the benefits of flock cameras. But I do believe he invests in flock cameras.
But sure.
What's in the air? You know what's in the air. You know what's in the air. You know what's in the air. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Joe Rogan talked to this guy, Andrew Wilson. This is a unhinged theologian, debater type of guy who has had all sorts of crash outs. He just came up in the kind of like OnlyFans model debate sphere, basically just rage bait content, and thrived in that lane because he takes these like hardline Christian theocratic positions, things like women shouldn't vote, literally, anti-feminism taken to the extreme, and these sort of like pick and choosy originalist arguments. So Rogan has had this guy on before, as well as his wife, who interestingly is also a commentator who preaches the same thing, anti-feminism. And so Rogan seems to have no real issue with this, and in this conversation has very warm exchange with this dude. And clearly this is just the type of people that he's hanging out with now. They seem very friendly with each other. And it's interesting to me what Rogan now views as a completely normal person to have around, because again, he doesn't challenge the ideology of this guy at all. The number one thing about this guy is that he doesn't think women should vote, basically, and all the other ideological trappings that come with that. And he has no questions about that. He doesn't question that aspect of this person at all. So I find that fascinating, given that he doesn't really have left-leaning people on this show in the same casual way. So here is the first part where this is Joe repeating a claim he's made a couple times about how in Canada, they're trying to make it legal to do polygamy because of Muslims. He's brought this up multiple times on the show, and this is one of many instances where Jamie fact checks him in real time here, and that kind of sets the stage for the nature of this conversation. So here's that.
The multiple wives thing, didn't they just pass something like that in Toronto? Wasn't that in Ontario, where they're allowing polygamy now because they have so many Islamic people living there that think that you should be allowed to have... Having multiple wives or spouses is illegal in Canada under Section 293 polygamy and Section 290 bigamy. What is bigamy?
Is that the other way? Is bigamy the other way? So polygamy is the man with multiple...
Do you know what it is, Jamie? Do you know what bigamy is? You ever heard of it? I don't even think I've ever seen that written. The act of marrying one person while still legally married. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, a bigamist, right. Duh.
Interesting story here, though.
What?
Some guy was married to 4 people at once. Sorry. 4 people at once in some way or another recently, like this year.
In America?
In Canada. See, Canada.
He was married to 4 women at once?
Multiple wives. Married, so he got multiple marriage licenses and should not have been given them or something.
Oh, well, he doesn't look Muslim. That guy looks like he's just a regular Christian guy. Oh, well, he does look Muslim.
But I don't know if it has anything to do
He might not be, though. He might just be a baller. Go back to that case in Canada, though. Isn't there something where they're trying to pass it in Toronto?
I don't think so. I mean, I typed in Toronto multiple wives.
Yeah, no, Toronto, Ontario, polygamy. I think they were trying to pass something.
I mean, so I went to news to see something, that would have popped up.
Was it Ottawa? Maybe it was Ottawa. Yeah. Canada, polygamy. No new law in Canada legalizing multiple wives.
Perhaps proposed law?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe it is a proposed law. Maybe I just read some horse shit on Twitter, which is very possible.
All right, so it's fascinating at this point how often this happens on this show. That Rogan will repeat something that he's heard somewhere and it gets fact checked. Sometimes he brings things up that are real, but very, very often he's just repeating something off of his timeline, I guess from Twitter. It's also funny that he calls it Twitter here, given that he's a fan and friend of Elon Musk. But he's constantly falling for these fake stories, like constantly. So I guess it's good that they have gotten a little bit more diligent about this fact-checking method, although sometimes Joe just kind of skirts around it or pushes right past it. But in this instance, he's just completely wrong about this. But like I said, he's brought it up on here before, so I wonder if he's going to stop saying it now at this point. But what he's definitely not going to stop doing is picking up on every single right-wing narrative that he sees online and running with that completely, just using it for content for his show. That's really what Rogan does at this point, is he just fleshes out his show with various right-wing conspiracies, or sometimes not right-wing conspiracies, but just like bizarre theories, and stitches it all together into a conversation with a person, and that makes for stimulating content for his audience. So I think that's really like the fundamental thing that works about Rogan at this point. And so here's him bringing up another thing that he's mentioned before, and this is where you can see the bias on both of these guys, and some very interesting phrasing in how they go about talking about the amount of bots and fake activity on the internet, and how certain narratives are propped up by certain people, just showing that it's impossible for them to communicate about even that without balancing it in a very particular political way.
But I'll bring it up again just for the sake of this. There was an FBI analyst who took a look at Twitter when Elon was buying it, and he estimated that 80% of the traffic is bots.
A lot of this stuff is bots, foreign accounts, people who are manipulating U.S. Elections. They're manipulating various U.S. interests, and this is happening all over the place.
Yeah.
Right now, you have progressives who are funded by ActBlue, right? And I've proven this. We traced all their money. It's progressives funded by ActBlue who are pushing the same narrative that like Candace Owens and others are pushing on the idea of Charlie Kirk's death and the conspiracy around that. Now, the woman who heads this particular organization received millions of dollars from ActBlue and other progressive organizations for this stated mission. That same woman right this second works with other X accounts to push the messaging that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by his own TPUSA insiders in order to push that narrative forward, because the stated goal still from that organization is to destroy TPUSA.
So how do we know that they've done this? Are there emails that have been found? Well,
the stated goal of this particular person
is to take down
TPUSA.
Right.
She's very open about that. And then the way that you know that they are talking to these other accounts is because they do it publicly. Those public accounts will talk to this account, right? Mm-hmm. Very openly. They reaffirm each other's posts. They say, wow, that's real interesting, this kind of thing. All affirming that same conspiracy that TPUSA was the ones who actually set up and murdered Charlie Kirk. And at millions of dollars in ActBlue funding going towards this. No joke. Anybody can look it up right now. The organization's called
So it's interesting that Rogan says, first of all, that this was a study that was done when Elon Musk was buying Twitter. So in other words, a time when Elon Musk had an interest in driving down the public valuation of Twitter based on the idea that it was mostly fake activity or whatever. And he says this was done by a former FBI analyst, CIA analyst. And that's true. It was. And that was an FBI agent who was then working in a private capacity for a firm that studies online information, I guess, and was conveniently published in between when Elon had announced he wanted to buy Twitter and when he had officially bought it, at a moment when he had rescinded the offer and said, I'm not going to buy Twitter anymore because of all this fake traffic. So clearly a planted article from a guy who does that for a living. And Twitter is like way worse now with the bots. It's like all these AI comments and shit like that are clearly AI, but Joe talks about how impossible it is to discern. So he's just getting absolutely cooked by his Twitter feed, pretty much personally by Elon Musk. And then this thing that Wilson is talking about, I've actually heard of this organization, Unfuck America. It's funny that he's promoting it here because they do follow Turning Point around. It's supposed to be like the counterpoint to Turning Point USA. Whatever. I mean, it's a little bit more of a centrist organization for me, but he's making the case here that they are funded by ActBlue. So that right there is the lie that's very telling, because ActBlue is not something that funds people. He's just basically stopping the thought there and saying ActBlue is funding them when that's really just a donation middleman. So the donations are coming from somewhere. So he could be making the case that these are coming from like corporate donors or particular places, PACs, or particular individuals. If he had individuals to name there to say this is who's funding this Unfuck America organization, he would just say the names. But he doesn't have that. He knows he can just point to ActBlue, and because the government is currently trying to tie them in as some kind of terrorist terrorist funding organization, those type of accusations are going to lead to scrutiny on this organization. He's essentially saying to the feds, hey, look at the Unfuck America tour in your McCarthyism. But it's interesting that he is kind of vaguely painting this picture of the fake engagement around the Charlie Kirk conspiracies while also ignoring the Candace Owens aspect of it. Candace Owens and others on the right have boosted that way more than this random liberal org. Nobody knows who that is, but everybody knows who Candace Owens is, and everybody has heard about the Charlie Kirk theories through Candace Owens. So where's the discussion of that being fake, botted views? He doesn't even like Candace Owens. He disagrees with her, and he goes into why he thinks of, all the stuff about the Charlie Kirk conspiracies is fake and stuff. So that's interesting. He's positioned against a lot of the right on that and criticizes Candace Owens here, but doesn't say that the engagement is fake and doesn't say that the boosting of those narratives that she puts out there is some kind of nefarious plot, because that is a nefarious plot that would tie in the rest of the messaging apparatus that he's a part of, including Joe Rogan. Again, because I always say that is the one connected more to capital. Like, the people making the most money, especially in America, are going to be the ones funding right-wing ideology, and that's what you're seeing on your feed. You're seeing floated ads, essentially, from people that have an interest in pushing back on specifically economic left-wing policy, but also the culture war slop as well. So an example of that, here is Joe Rogan making the argument about why Mark Andreessen thinks that we should have flock cameras.
People can be so awesome and so shit at the same time, coexisting on the same patch of dirt, and no one devises a legitimate strategy for mitigating the amount of people that suck and the problems with.
Can it even be done?
I don't know. I mean, not with freedom. I mean, this is the flock camera question. Do you want Big Brother looking at your license plate everywhere you go? Well, listen, if someone shoots up, like this is an argument that Mark Andreessen made on this podcast. When he had come here, right before he had come here, there was a shooting in Austin where some kids just randomly started shooting at people. And then they couldn't find them in Austin. But as soon as they left Austin city limits, they went into an area that had flock cameras, and they got them like that. So this was his argument for the benefits of flock cameras. But I do believe he invests in flock cameras.
But sure, but you can make that argument with CCTV as well. You can make that argument with
everyone wear a chip. Yeah, everyone wear a body camera.
Yeah, so I imagine you'll see this clip in videos that are like, Joe Rogan is compromised. Joe Rogan is blah. And it's true, he is. And this is the perfect example of that. And I really want people to understand the structure of that, because Rogan talks about people being compromised all the time, where he talks about the same type of conspiracies, power, how psyops are, being wielded to manipulate people. And the question is, like, where's the interest, right? Like, what are you trying to convince people of, and who and why? And so Rogan would tell you that it's because of the government trying to manipulate people to be obedient to the government. But this, on his show, is an example of him preaching these flock cameras, which is a private company that seeks to benefit off of the government's desire to have a database full of everybody's information, as well as any other private customer that happens to do a front or backdoor deal with that company, and many, many others. Flock cameras isn't the only one. So Rogan's role is to preach that idea and to let people like Andrew Wilson and Mark Andreessen onto his show to preach these pretty horrendous ideas under this guise of, like, this is just normal conversation. This is exactly what he did with Trump and JD Vance. Casual worldview type conversations that really just serve to move the needle and make people think that some of this crazy shit that they're saying is normal. And so the last point I want to make about this Wilson guy is, they talk a lot about, like, the religion of the left, and how essentially any religious person is going to tell you that people who are not religious, atheistic or secular or whatever, that's a religion too. They just don't realize it. So everything is framed as a religion, and that's the point that they're making here, that progressives have this sort of like religious or dogmatic worldview. And I think it's important to show the duplicitousness of this guy Andrew Wilson, given the fact that Rogan gives him a platform to just come across so casual and breezy. He really is quite a horrendous person, and here's an example of his manipulation. Warning, this is him turning the rage bait on. So prepare yourself for that, and there is a reason I'm showing you this.
And when you get down to the core pillar of their ideology, a lot of them think not only is this justified, I'll give you an example. There's a guy who was inside the Twitch sphere who says, well, wouldn't you kill Hitler if you could before he became Hitler? That's his justification.
Right.
And so you see many progressives who have this kind of justification, and that leads to a huge amount of political violence, which becomes normalized because they justify it through the lens of, I'm stopping a monster.
Right.
I've never thought these people see me as a human being. I don't think that they do. I think that they see me, most of them, at least the ones I debate with, as an actual monster who's trying to take from, or destroy them or hurt them in some way. Secular humanism is really interesting because, and I've debated the most prominent secular humanists in the world.
Who's that?
Well, I did Matt Dillahunty. I've done several secular humanist debates. Matt Dillahunty was the funniest thing in the world. He rage quit in the first few minutes of the debate in my opening statement because I brought up this glaring contradiction in his worldview. I said, why should, so he was dating he's dating a trans person, but he says he's not gay. Right? So I'm not gay, but I'm dating a trans person. So I brought this up and I said, the way that we can assess truth claims, I can just point an easy one out of how we can assess that maybe this isn't a good way to evaluate truth claims.
Right.
Because he says he's in a non-homosexual relationship with a trans woman and reconciles that by saying, no, that's a real woman. And I'm like, if we can't even distinguish what's real and what's true, how could you even
rage quit off that?
Oh, he was so angry. He called me a bunch of names, got up and rage quit for me pointing out this glaring contradiction in his ideology.
So this is a good example of the thing that fascists do where they're like small victims and also bullies. And the first second that they get to be the bully or to just utilize force against somebody rather than logic or whatever they're trying to pretend their project is about, they do it. And so when a liberal or a leftist, shows no compassion to his face or in his view doesn't view him as a person or is mean to him, that's a sign that they are just like godless, amoral creatures, monsters. And then in the next breath, he talks about debating this guy, Matt Dillahunty, and immediately attacking him for who he's married to, calling him gay or attacking his sexuality or trying to make the debate about that as though that's not clearly a tactic to get him upset. And also just incredibly disrespectful. Anybody would be upset if you disrespected their wife. So he's clearly purposely doing that and then using that to say, oh, look at this wimp who can't defend his ideas. And that's how you know this is somebody who's just trying to manipulate the public discourse. He's not trying to change his ideas. He's not trying to actually come to any type of compromise. And I feel the same way about Charlie Kirk. And that's why I think this guy was kind of aligned with Charlie Kirk, honestly, although I would say this dude's definitely way more extreme. But I've heard Charlie advancing the same type of arguments about anti-feminism, and it ultimately leads to the same conclusion about suffrage. And that's what Wilson is talking about, both because it's very shocking and also because he does want to take things away from people. When he catches himself saying there in that clip, oh, they think of me a monster, someone who wants to take something away from them, to do something to them. He realizes as he's saying that he does want to take something away from people. He wants to take people's rights. He thinks that there are too many rights and that they should essentially only be afforded to those who can defend it with force. So that's the type of ideology that Rogan is casually keeping himself around. These are not people who have a positive vision for what this country should be and what your life and what your kids' life should look like. And as much as they think they do, clearly they're trying to take us in a very dark direction.
I'm in the pocket, and they know they can't slow it, can't stop shit. How the game so cold, so toxic. Can't drop cause they're in somebody's pocket. For me, that's not it.